talk to me nice. Talk to me honestly. Look in my eyes. Don't let it fall on me. Say you're a good guy.
Now, if you ever wanted to learn more about finances, especially as it relates to your sales career, you're in the right place. We're going to have a conversation about being financially prepared for all stages of a woman's life journey. Because if you're a sales professional, there's some other things that happen that goes along with that. And one of the things you want to get right is your finances. And we have a conversation that's going to be between Andrea Harper Wilson and Christie Martin Rodriguez. And if you want to really know about how to be financially prepared for all stages of your journey as a woman in sales, you want to pay close attention to this conversation. Now, Andrea Harper Wilson is a strategic account director of financial services at digital experiences at Adobe. And she's going to be having a common, courageous, but really compelling conversation with Christie Martin Rodriguez. She happens to be the Senior Vice President of Retirement Institute at Nationwide Financial. So here is a time if you want to get your money right, if you want to get your finances right, but more importantly, you want to navigate all aspects of your journey as a woman in sales, you want to pay close attention. Let's go ahead and hear from these wonderful women.
Hi, Christie. How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. Looking forward to spending some time with you.
Absolutely. The feeling is mutual. Well, I'm really excited about today's fireside chat. And I just want to start off by giving the people on the other end of this screen an introduction of who you are and your stellar career path, if you don't mind.
I appreciate it. I'm humbled. I can't wait to hear about this stellar career path.
Absolutely. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Andrea Wilson. I am a strategic account director for Adobe for financial services. And today I have the opportunity to sit down and have a fireside chat with Miss Christie Martin Rodriguez. Christie currently serves as Senior VP of Nationwide Retirement Institute for Nationwide Financial. Today, Christie's leading teams responsible for advocating for and educating members, partners, and industry leaders on issues that are really impacting their ability to have a secure and financial future. In her current role, Christie oversees an extensive network of knowledgeable professionals, including sales support professionals who provide a hands-on consultation experience to develop clients' strategies and address their major concerns for people like you and me when faced with planning for retirement. Christie has over 20 years of extensive experience in business-to-business and direct-to-consumer strategies and building high-performance teams. Now, Christie joined Nationwide in 2015 as the Vice President of Marketing for Nationwide Retirement Plan Business. Before joining Nationwide, Christie held marketing and business leader roles at Aetna and United Health Group. And her experience includes functioning as the enterprise program lead of healthcare reform for United Healthcare. Additionally, Christie led a business development team working with the public sector, labor and trust, and national accounts as liaison to their sales organization. Christie has a bachelor's degree in finance from Hampton University, as well as Series 6 and 26 security registrations. Welcome, Christie, again. And I am just, like I said, I am honored to have this opportunity to host this finance fireside chat with you. It is going to be fun, conversational, and I am so happy that we're able to sit down today. And so I know that I shared a lot about your professional life, and we'll get to the work that you do as the conversation continues. But tell us a little bit about Christie outside of work.
Well, first of all, thank you, Andrea. This has been the highlight of my week. I cannot wait to have this fireside chat with you. So yeah, I like to call myself a multi-dimensional woman, which I'm sure many of us on the screen can appreciate. So outside of work, I've been a proud wife to my husband, Al, for over 20 years. And we have two beautiful daughters, one who is a sophomore at Spelman College studying biochem and Spanish, and another daughter who is a sophomore in high school. And so, as you can imagine, balancing a family and a professional career, I am also, and people say I'm almost cult-like, addicted to my Peloton machine. So I have both the bike and the tread. So outside of work, you can find me on any given day on that Peloton, either the tread or the bike, for at least 30 to 45 minutes. And I absolutely love doing that. I'm also a very avid reader, which I love to read about 3 or 4 books at a time. So, that's kind of how I come down in my family life. But I'm also find myself being very involved in my community. So I'm a native of Michigan, but moved to Columbus over 11 years ago, and really involved. So I'm very active, not only in my sorority, but in the Links Incorporated. I also sit on 2 boards, Kindway, which is a local board here in Columbus, where we focus on successful reentry of those individuals who've been incarcerated, both men and women. And I serve on the board of directors of the board of trustees for the American College of Financial Services. So I'm trying to juggle it all, as we all do. But really, I find it to be a great balance of, being able to be out in the community, living professionally, and definitely being there for my family. So as you can see, 24 hours in a day sometimes isn't enough for me, but I definitely try to make sure that when I need to give my attention to one area, I appropriately balance that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I heard you mention, how to walk away from stress and how to de-stress. As we think about 2020 and the stress that was brought on us, and a lot of folks moving to working from home, going through all of this through the pandemic, and juggling those at-home responsibilities. You mentioned the Peloton and reading to reduce stress and just to relax. Are there any other areas that you use to de-stress?
Sure. Andrea, we often think about the pandemic as being kind of this time that was so heavy. What I actually found as I reflect now that we're almost 20 months into it, is it really gave me a chance to recalibrate. And you heard me talk about all the different things that I've been involved in. But one of the things that I feel most proud about over the last 18 months, other than re-engaging with my health, because that was very important for me, knowing that I had a family history of some pre-existing conditions. But I also found this is an awesome time to get into mindfulness. And, it sometimes can sound so, out there, but I've really found an appreciation of getting back centered. So every morning before I pull my head up off of the pillow, I think of one thing that I'm grateful for. I think about, what are my intentions of the day? And I really am trying to be much more purposeful and really intentional about how I move throughout the day, and thinking about those thoughts and those things that will allow me to center. And I really feel like the pandemic brought that on, because we got to a point, I'm thinking about the women in this virtual audience, we were no longer in control. And so I found what meditation has done, and I think you can relate to this, is it helps you say, how do I control the controllables? And so I'm now a phenomenal advocate around not only the physical health, but your mental health has to be a priority, particularly we as Black women who are so used to giving to everyone and thinking about ourselves last. And I just found that if I could leave anyone with anything today, really centering yourself and taking that time to appreciate your mental health and what you need to pour into yourself is of the utmost importance.
Yeah, that's crucial and critical, especially in sales. That mindfulness and a moment of transparency. 2020 was a glorious year in my career because I closed one of the largest deals of my lifetime. But then also, and the stress of that deal also landed me in the emergency room thinking I was having a heart attack, but it was actually stress. So I am 100% behind you when it comes to being mindful every morning. I've taken on meditation as a way to de-stress myself. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's a good point to hit before we move right into finance.
and I want to tell you, thank you for your authenticity. So often we as Black women, we put on this exterior that we can't share. So I even appreciate you sharing that, is that while you had this tremendous success in business, you were also struggling from that mental and that physical health. So thank you. I hope someone in the audience is even encouraged by that dialogue.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's move into finance. I always find it interesting to understand how people chose their career, right? So you've been extremely successful. I think I've read a lot about your background. Some of I didn't even share today. So can you share with me why you were interested in the finance industry?
So I laugh because my career path, even going back to my undergraduate degree at Hampton, was anything but linear. I often joke and say, I used to call them to my parents, they're like, what major now? I changed my major at least 7 times trying to find myself. But what I found, Andrea, just to take a step back, is I actually unintentionally, this is in the 90s, took a gap year in the middle of my college career. I did that after my sophomore year. And I really focused on the fact that I wanted to go into entertainment. And so unbeknownst, and my parents were shocked. I said, I'm leaving Hampton for a little bit. I'm moving to New York City. They're just looking at me like I'm crazy. And I end up getting this phenomenal job. I was trying to audition in acting, but I got a phenomenal job as an unpaid intern at Def Jam Records. And that was actually, I'm sharing going this far back because that was pivotal in me thinking about my career. What I quickly found there is I want to be on the business side. I don't want to be the side that's considered talent, but I want to be on the side where there's deals being made, and really where I saw is kind of the epicenter of really advancing financially. And so that's when I decided, after doing that for about 2 years, I returned back to Hampton University, majored in finance, and, had this great end of my academic career. But the first job I went into in financial services was a credit risk analyst. And I don't know if people can feel my energy. That is not me. Like, I am not the person you put in a cube every day to look at numbers. And what I realized is that, it wasn't a passion. And so I went to healthcare because healthcare became a passion. I saw this as a way of me feeling like I had a sense of purpose to give back. Had a great career in healthcare, a number of careers. And then the opportunity where my family and I moved to Ohio, I discovered Nationwide. They had an opportunity in the retirement plans business with me leading their marketing organization. I took that. And that's when I said, you know what, in my mind, and this was kind of a new concept that we were talking about then, how important wealth and health and how they were connected. And from there, it literally, Andrea, just took off because I said, this is a way that I can use my voice to think about not only helping individuals think about how they need to care for themselves physically, but how this also can translate into their financial well-being. And so from there, and I'll share this with the audience, I'm skipping over a lot, but I'll say in all of my jobs that you talked about, in healthcare, and even when I got to Nationwide, one thing occurred to me. I never stayed in a job really longer than 2 years. I only applied for one job going into the company, but I never stayed longer than 2 years. And a lot of that had to do is I took a couple of risks. And at the time, I didn't think of them as risks. So I don't want people to think like your career is this one big risk. It was a series of things that I exposed myself to. Some I absolutely love, some I would never do again. But I think all of that kind of prepared my career. And then moving into financial services, I learned, just rounding this out, it's so much more than just one role or one job. There's really a tremendous amount of opportunity that I could, one, bring my authentic self based on the company that I was working for, but also discover a role in financial services that was not going to just fulfill me from a compensation standpoint, but fulfill my sense of well-being and wanting to be able to feel like, there's going to be some way that I can leave a legacy or an imprint well beyond me being in a very specific job.
That is awesome, Christie. And I think we may be soul sisters. I'm not sure.
Yeah. We're wearing almost the same color. I think we are.
I know, right? And it's ironic that our paths are just so similar. I mean, I took a gap year out of high school before going off to Tennessee State. I didn't know it was called a gap year. I think my parents just thought I sat out of school. But I took a gap year because I wanted to work in entertainment. Ended up working for Atlantic Records for a number of years. I thought I was going to, be this mastermind business mogul behind the record industry. And lo and behold, that I ended up in sales, which still gave me the fulfillment, like you said, of closing deals and being able to see something from infancy to maturity. So that's awesome. I didn't know we had so much in common.
I know we are definitely kindred spirits.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I know one thing that we were discussing yesterday that I thought was, really important as we were talking. What should women of color know about savings for retirement, right? You're working in, the financial sector and the retirement vertical, which is very specialized. And I know you see people like me and others who look like the members of this virtual audience today. What are some of the things that we should know about saving for retirement?
Yeah, there are really, I like to call them 5 insights. And I want to center them around, if anyone wants to take notes, this is probably the place to do it, particularly when I'm speaking to women and women of color. The first thing we need to realize is women are living longer. And I know this goes without saying, but, even within the last century, women are living 25 years longer than our male counterparts. And so that's very important. So when we think about retirement, it's no longer kind of this small, finite period. It is very likely that a lot of women will live well beyond their 90s, and oftentimes if they're married without their spouse. And so that's one thing I always want to make sure that when I'm talking to women, is that we understand that our longevity is definitely a prominent aspect, and preparing and saving for retirement, you're going to have to think about how do you save on that longer term than men do. The other thing, and this really goes out when I look into the camera to our Black women, is we are always, and this is cultural, caregivers. And so we laugh because not only do I feel like I'm in the sandwich generation in my late 40s with caring for my mother and my younger kids. I said, I'm no longer a sandwich. You feel like a panini, like you kind of getting squeezed and burned on both sides. And so it's so important for us as Black women, not just to say, you know what, we know we have this noble responsibility of caring for our elders, which I know we do culturally, and we do it for our young, but we have to start saying, how are we planning and saving and preparing for that? Mm-hmm. How are we thinking about things like life insurance, long-term care insurance, to ensure that we have those pieces in place? And one data point a lot of the individuals in the audience may not know is Black caregivers give over 8 hours a week more than our white counterparts in caring for our families. And often we don't see that compensation. So I really think it's so important for Black women, as we're having this retirement discussion, that we're also thinking about, the fact that we serve in such a critical role as caregivers for our family. The third insight I would say is start planning for retirement early. One statistic I always say is, we looked at counts of Black individuals who had retirement accounts, and there's only 44% of Black Americans who have retirement accounts.
Wow.
And to date, they have about an average balance of $20,000. Let me just tell you, that might not even cover one catastrophic event. If you had to go to the hospital, $20,000. So it's so important as you think about your health and long and well-being that you're really thinking about, how do I start saving for retirement early? We also looked at some data, even at Nationwide, and it said most individuals don't start saving for retirement till they're 31. Well, that's still young, but if you just added a few more years ahead of that, you would possibly have a couple $100,000 more that you would have accumulated with compound interest for retirement. And then the last 2 insights that I'll bring up that are so important, and I know this goes without saying, our expenses are changing. Everything is going up. And so as you think about it, if you're in your 30s or your 40s, the cost of healthcare is probably going to increase, the cost of living. And so it's really important that you're not just thinking about the short term, you're thinking about the long term and what those increases and prices may be. Mm-hmm. And then the last, that I'll round out with this kind of planning for retirement is understanding the impact that debt has to it. So we often think about, you know what, I'm going to charge it, I'll pay it off. The interest starts to accumulate. Well, that's money that you could have been leveraging to save in your nest egg for retirement. So it's really about that last insight about thinking about your here and now, and how do you get some of your expenses under control in your current state so you can have a little to save in the future. And I just say, I always tell women and just our people in general, this isn't all or nothing. You can balance, you can save for retirement and meet your current needs. And it may take some adjustment, it may take some modification, but those are things you should definitely start doing no matter how old you are, what age you are.
Absolutely. I mean, those 5 points, Christy, are extremely critical to, I think, the success of, being able to retire comfortably, right? Absolutely. I mean, and there are other avenues as well, investments, whether they're, I'm trying to think, what was I going to say? The investments, right? Yeah. My mind went away from me because I'm thinking about another question that I want to ask you. But yeah, so investments and things of that nature. There are other areas where, that you can also add to be able to retire comfortably. And I think it takes research. I think it takes looking at companies like Nationwide and the experts there that provide, those consultations and can help lead you to a space and a place that's comfortable for you to start saving.
Yeah. And Andrea, I think you were hitting on a very, very important point. It is beyond just your 401k and your employee match or mutual funds. Really take the time to sit down and think about your financial well-being, short-term and long-term. And I would suggest, to individuals, if you can, get a financial professional. We go to doctors when we're feeling ill, and if you can afford that, please do. And if not, there are a number of resources that you can leverage. One quick one that I might share with the audience is health savings accounts. And so a lot of us believe, you know what, I got to use my health savings account for, before it runs out through the end of the year. Well, first of all, that health savings account will accumulate over time. And that's money that you can use well into your retirement. And you should see me now when I go into Walgreens or CVS, I'm like, do I really want to use my health savings account for this $10 prescription? Nope, I'm going to pay for it in cash because who knows, I can allow that money to accumulate my HSA over time and use that in a moment where I absolutely have to. But I think you bring up a very good point. It's about really understanding where you are and thinking about your larger investment picture in the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So on to the question that took my thought away.
No problem.
Earlier. How should women of color utilize their bonuses and commissions to create generational wealth? Some of us are walking away with, sometimes it's $500,000 worth of commission, right? How do we use that to create generational wealth?
Yeah, I love this question because someone who used to definitely work directly getting incentive compensation, we know that'll vary. It could be $500,000 one year and $80,000 the next. So this is very important conversation and dialogue. I'm going to say something that might be a little bit like, wow, Christy, that's basic, but it's so important. I think this is where we as Black women need to sit down and make a plan. And when we sit down and make that plan, no matter, take your incentive comp and your bonus out of it, start asking your questions that are going to get to the root of your why. Where do I want to be? What would it be like if money was no object? Where do I see myself? And you don't even have to go 10 years out, in 5 years. What do my family dynamics look like? And so I think when you start with that baseline of what is your plan and you're working to that plan, the ebb and flow of how your bonus or compensation will come in, it won't necessarily derail you from where you ultimately want to go. And I think so often we get this money and we're so excited, we're like, we're going to go out. But if you go back to what is that plan, I think that's so important. The second thing I recommend that we do is talk about it. I mentioned on the onset that I have a husband of 20 years and two daughters. Well, they're part of, and some of you out there may be single, but you may have parents and other loved ones you're taking care of. Talk about, hey, this ebb and flow doesn't all, it's going to come and go. I want to sit down with you and I want to make sure that we understand what we need to do financially as a family or what I need to do as a single person. So I think the one thing that we need to make sure that we're doing is having that conversation so all of our loved ones are on the same page. And I talked about this before. It's about living within your means. I would strongly encourage, because as I said, I have been there when I was younger and also when I was older in sales compensation positions it's so often that, get comfortable that your means is that 500,000. And so I would say, go back to your plan and really make a budget around how you're living in your means to ensure that you have, all the things that you want to do to prepare for the future. And the last I would tell you, whatever you do, and this goes back to Andrea, our first question, make sure you prioritize your health and wellness there. I know so often, and I'm just going to be 100% real with this audience. I was like, I'm getting this Louis Vuitton, I'm getting this pair of shoes, and I didn't prioritize my health in that. And I said, what, part of if I want to live in retirement, I have to be healthy, and I don't want to have all my expenses. So I would just encourage all of you, even if it's 5% of whatever it is that you bring in that year, to make sure you're also thinking about your health and what you need to pour into yourself so you can continue to be successful.
Absolutely. And that's one of the beautiful things about working in sales. You have the ability to, create your own wealth, right? Based on how hard you work, the deals that you close. And a lot of people don't get that because they're, taking home their base salary every year. And you can actually put those commissions away, right? And use that to save and invest for future endeavors.
Absolutely. That's such a perfect, way to even think about that. That is awesome. Think about what your mean would be, not the extreme and not the low, and commit to yourself to putting that aside to invest and allow your money to make money. That's how that's where the wealth comes in. Yes.
Absolutely. All right. So as we're still on this topic, so, many sales professionals, we consider new companies, new opportunities as we progress through our sales career, right? We're inundated with LinkedIn requests to connect with recruiters and opportunities they're sharing with us. Can you share some advice on or your experience that you've had that the listeners should consider when thinking about making career moves?
Yes, and there's so much to unpack with that question, and and you talked about earlier my over 20-year experience. I kind of have a very opinionated on this one. Is that I know this goes without saying, and we hear this cliche all the time: "Go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated." As I look at my younger self and I look into this audience and think back to a time where, I was making decisions to move, and even now, what's going to be extremely important is think about not only a company where you can maximize your compensation, but the company culture. I've had the blessing and the pleasure of working for 3 Fortune 100 companies. 2 of them have been in the top 10, but I can tell you, I've never worked for an employer like Nationwide, where my own personal, morals are aligned with the company morals. And that makes a tremendous difference. And I say that because you can truly be your authentic self, and you can show up in companies like that support the culture. And honestly, let's face it, Black women right now are in a very hot commodity. And there are a lot of companies that are looking for bringing on, not only because we're Black women, but because we're extremely talented and we're in these roles because we're successful and we've met goals. But I would just encourage you, do your research. Make sure that you're not just going to be another person that they post as part of their diversity kind of outlook. Make sure it's going to be a company that's going to allow you to grow and take time to understand the culture of that company and the organization or whatever team you're going into that organization. And that would be, I'm saying that from the most sincerest place in my heart, because I've been there. I've been places where I've been tolerated, or I've been, we want to fill this seat, versus someone that says, Christie, not only are you at the table, we're expecting you to lean in at the table. And I now have the ability to bring others along that look like me without question. And I'm not asked about that. We truly at Nationwide look at inclusion for performance, not inclusion because it's just the right thing to do. But really knowing that by bringing these different voices, these different genders and ethnicities and thoughts to the table, we will win as a result of that.
That is powerful. That is very powerful. Kudos to Nationwide, and and for you, Christie, to be able to work for such an organization that feeds into that narrative. That's excellent. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I know you can appreciate this, and many probably women in the audience. We walk around. I'll admit, being very authentic, I dealt with imposter syndrome. Prior to, my career at Nationwide, that I had to do certain things to fit in, or was I qualified enough? And so I would just love to encourage everyone in this audience to really go to a place that you can live out your passion, your authentic self, because that's how they're going to get the best out of you, and you're going to get the best out of that organization.
Absolutely. And I think we've all dealt with imposter syndrome. I'm almost 17 years in my career, and I think 2020 was the year that I was able to see some powerful African-American women, show up with braids, CEOs show up with braids. And I had never worn braids at work before, but 2020 was my year. So, showing up as my authentic self really has helped me be more confident. And I think that's shown through the success that I've had. And I've heard a lot of other women, African-American women, say the same. So thank you for sharing that.
And thank you for sharing that about Adobe. Awesome. Kudos to you all as well. Yes. Absolutely.
So tell me, how did your relationship with finances evolve alongside your career and personal journey?
Right. So I'll go back to my childhood. I'm thinking about, I had the blessing of probably like many of you or the individuals in the audience. I had the beauty of growing up with a strong sense of family. So both sets of my grandparents were domestics and sharecroppers in the South, who, migrated their family. We all went due north from Alabama and Arkansas to Michigan to start a career. And what I appreciated when I always reflect back on my grandparents, it was the sacrifice they afforded my parents, not only to be the first in their family to graduate from high school and from college, but also to get their PhDs. But one of the things that I noticed, Andrea, is we never, even highly educated as my parents were, we never talked about wealth building. We always talked about, income, pay your bills on time, pay your tithes, but we never talked about what is this going to look like? Is this accumulation? And I think as I moved into the industry and I had the good fortune of meeting individuals who did not look like me, whose families, either came from wealth or they built wealth, I started picking up on their habits and traits and start changing the narrative, not only with my children about kind of this baseline financial literacy, but truly how they can build wealth. And one of the examples I give often that some people laugh about, some people like, that's actually a really good idea. When my daughters were really young, we used to give them a $10 bill. As they got older, it's a $20 bill. And we'd look at the serial number and we'd say, if you keep this until 6 months, we'll double it. So what we were doing in our mind, and it's actually helped them, is kind of delay gratification, but think about compound interest. So now what I want them to see, as they got older, we got a little bit more sophisticated on how they need to think about investments and stocks. But I wanted to really change that narrative as my family. It's not just about how much you have right now and understanding, you can make X amount of dollars, but if you're not saving any of it and you're not passing any of it on, that's not wealth building.
Right.
And so I think that's where, my relationship, my healthy relationship evolved over time, because it was just something, our families were in survival mode. It wasn't something that was necessarily taught. But now that I have an appreciation of how I want to see that change in my daughters, I'm also sharing that same knowledge with my brother and sister and my mother, as well, because this is part of what we need to do to really change the legacy of our family.
Absolutely. I mean, who came up with the idea of looking at the serial number on a $10 bill?
It was my sister who's also in finance said, you should do that. And I was like, that is phenomenal. But they caught on and they understood, like, wow, this is, now we were like, now come on, now compound interest may not always accumulate this quickly, but it gave them a sense like, you mean to tell me I could potentially have, $80 at the end of the year, or
right.
60. It was just something that, they were able to conceptualize and really help with their wealth building acumen.
That's awesome. That's awesome and creative. Well, Christie, I believe we're almost at time. I want to thank you. This has been so informative. I really hope that, our audience walks away with a better understanding of, starting today, right? Start today. Build that foundation, start building the layers for your generational wealth, for your savings, for your retirement, and just for your overall financial health. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to speak to me and to the audience of Sisters in Sales Summit, their 4th annual summit. So thank you so much.
And thank you. You were a fabulous moderator, and I love the jewels and the pearls that you dropped as well.
Thank you.